other classes. The only real difference is that they don't necessarily thrive on larger maps where ranged attackers and magicians would easily dominate. In my day, I even utilized the bubblings at the end of Shumi's Jump Quest as a staple training spot given their density. And density is usually the answer. Wild boars are another example of this. They move quickly and group up often. Once the necessary accuracy is acquired, wild boars can last a future hero quite a long time, even reaching into the early second job training meta. After many hours at Wild Boars, hopefully acquiring an above-average Lionheart sword for future use in the process, Sword Loop is ready to finally commit to the path of a hero, but there are still a few more steps required to reach that point, the first of which is job advancing to Fighter. The first two skills in a fighter's kit are Sword and Axe Mastery. Both give accuracy and increase minimum damage when equipped with the corresponding weapon. Fighter is the only class in the game who uses axes in any official capacity, and there's quite a lot to discuss regarding that weapon type. As we know, all warriors lean very heavily on Mastery's accuracy increase, as it pretty significantly relieves what would otherwise need to be acquired through gear or valuable stats. Next up are Final Attack Sword and Axe, another instance of two separate skills that are identical outside of applying to different types of weapons. Just like every other Final Attack skill we've discussed, this skill procs after using Slash Blast or Power Strike at a set chance, and it locks your character into an animation while it executes that attack. The final skill duo for a fighter is Sword and Axe Booster. These skills increase attack speed for up to 200 seconds and are only applicable to the corresponding weapon type. Wildly important skill here, especially for a class who uses such slow weapons. The first buff outside of Iron Body, and the only party buff heroes ever receive that isn't a common skill, is Rage. At max level, this skill gives plus 12 weapon attack, which is a very welcome buff. Interestingly, it also lowers weapon defense, as though this is some sort of balancing act meant to make the skill feel more like a trade-off to use. The issue is the plus 12 weapon attack in exchange for minus 12 weapon defense is not even close to equal in terms of impact. 12 weapon defense is practically nothing. In practice, you would maybe take 8 to 10 less damage from a hit. And 12 weapon attack is a pair of work gloves that costs hundreds of millions of mesos. There's really not much more to say about Rage. It's pretty good, but because it doesn't stack with any other attack buffs besides Echo, it was easily replaced by NLC's Warrior Elixirs once those came out. The final fighter skill is Power Guard, and this is an interesting one. Not only does this skill reflect damage taken, enabling HP warriors and opening the door to insane leeching methods, but it also reduces damage taken up front. While the damage reflected isn't strictly valuable in most scenarios, it's just not enough damage to matter, that damage reduction is absolutely worth the cost of entry of 30 skill points. It's just annoying that it has to be recast every 90 seconds. Fighters actually have one of the most approachable skill builds in the game, retaining a whopping 33 skill points after maxing their core skills. This is not quite enough to go hybrid, and even if you were to pursue that path and compromise by not maxing either of the booster skills, you'd still find it mostly pointless to do so, as both weapon types have access to all of the exact same skills, though it can be done if so desired. Between choosing either swords or axes and maxing their respective mastery and booster skills, that only leaves Rage and Power Guard as the two remaining skills to max. That leaves a lot of extra points that could be added to Iron Body or another skill. As is the case with Spearmen and Pages, as we'll discuss later, Final Attack retains the exact same attributes for fighters, an overall increase in single target DPS, and a noticeable drop in mobbing damage. This is because of Final Attack's absolutely ridiculous design of not applying the 250% damage multiplier to every monster hit, but instead applying it as a total across the number of monsters hit. What's worse is that it's not even a linear distribution. It's very common to see warriors with Final Attack hitting single-digit damage on the 6th enemy, even if they're regularly capable of hitting over 1k normally. With that being said, let's talk about an argument in favor of Final Attack. The potential upside of Final Attack manifests primarily in one specific meta, the Deep Aqua Road Gobi training meta. Because of skills that Sword Loop will receive in 3rd Job, Slash Blast actually has very little impact when training on this map. With the bombing fish houses being the bulk of the Gobi HP, this means that single target attacks are kind of king here. Because of this, if Gobis are the best training spot for most of 3rd Job, which they often are depending on the version, Final Attack is actually not a terrible pick. However, its negative impact on Slash Blast will be felt throughout 2nd Job and most of 3rd Job, but it will allow Crusaders to very easily dominate one of the historically best training spots in the game. They don't really need this extra boost, but hey, that's an argument for it, I guess. It's hard to make a good argument in favor of Final Attack. I'm doing the best I can.
很多人高精深啊，操你妈的嘞！
At this point in progression, weapon choice begins to matter because it's becoming slightly more set in stone, more permanent with the additions of Mastery and Booster. Sword Loop, true to his name, will be sticking with swords. But what's the difference here? Unlike Dark Knights, whose polearms and spears both served a practical purpose up until a certain point, both heroes and paladins have to make a decision and stick to it because there's no predetermined use case for all of their weapon types and not enough of a cushion in terms of skill points to allow them to easily build hybrid. Swords are by far the most common, and for good reason. While they don't possess a higher damage multiplier, theirs is stable and unchanging, whereas an axe will use different damage calculations based on whether it's swung or stabbed, which is randomly chosen at a 60-40 ratio when attacking. In 4th Job, there's a skill that will always execute one stab and one slash, so by choosing Axe, the hero finds exposure to both the high axe multiplier of swinging and the low axe multiplier of stabbing, whereas a sword will always use the same multiplier. This isn't necessarily bad conceptually, but the issue simply comes down to the fact that axes were undertuned, and with a fair 50-50 spread of stabs and swings, which heroes will always have, axes will, without fail, come out below an equivalent sword's rock-solid stable multiplier. The obvious answer here would be to balance them so that the average multiplier with this 50-50 spread would equal the sword's unchanging multiplier or be slightly higher than it. Maybe even just match it closer, but they never did that. Axes just always got the short stick. Before 4th Job, the only difference is attack speed really. Axes are often slower than their sword counterparts, though this is not a universal truth of axes. Sometimes they're the exact same speed. Generally speaking though, by the time the player has committed to either axes or swords, they're locked in. And axe heroes are infinitely cooler than sword heroes, let's be honest. But since Sword Loop insisted on using swords, let's talk about some of those. The first and most obvious choice for an early 2nd Job fighter is the Lionheart Sword. A level 35 two-handed sword that has the added bonus of being 5 attack speed rather than the usual 6. This makes up a good chunk of its lack of damage compared to higher level choices, and thus it can be used for quite a long time. Skipping over the level 40 Zard and jumping straight into the iconic Lion's Fang, or its reskinned variant that's also 5 attack speed, the Tiger's Fang. An NLC exclusive weapon, by the way, that region that never stops delivering overpowered content. Beyond that, there's the legendary Japanese map sword that was far more commonly used than either the Lion's Fang or Tiger's Fang, strictly because it was a drop from leprechauns, making it more accessible. You know, those Masteria enemies who had a wicked valuable drop pool and were brain dead easy to farm. After that, you had the 6 attack speed Sparta, which is cool but always looked like a toy to me. It's hard to take it seriously with its rubber blade. There was the Maple Soul Rowan, which was usually the last sword people would use until endgame because of its insanely busted 35 accuracy increase. That more than made up for the weapon attack you would lose by not switching to something like the Daiwa sword or the Doombringer. Two-handed swords are up there in terms of weapon type that consistently has the best design, and this is observable as early as level 35. That Lionheart sword design is just so simple and satisfying. If you wanted to use one-handed swords, the options were abundant, and there were more choices for fun weapons. Maple Miss Lights, Gladius, Maple Sword, the legendary Red Whip, the Flaming Katana, the Yellow Umbrella, which had less weapon attack than equal level one-handed swords, making it a better choice for magicians. There was the Trouse, the Glowing Whip, the Maple Soul Singer, the Nameless Sword and Onyx Blade, the Jeweled Guitar, the second-tier Lunchbox, the Maple Glory Sword, the NLC exclusive Astral Blade, and the most commonly used and possibly the most recognizable one-handed sword in this level range, the Red Katana. And this doesn't even cover the axes, of which there are a few really cool unique options like the Blue Counter, Hawkhead, Sabertooth, Maple Demon Axe, Chrono, and the NLC exclusive Crescent Moon. As you can see, fighters had tons of choices for weapons, and we didn't even cover all of them on this list. One of the best sources of EXP for any warrior in the mid to late 40s is Carnival PQ, the cool version where you invite a level 30 into your party and then enter a 2v2 with your buddy on the other team before you guys both kick your low-level party members so you can both solo the mobs and get all of the XP. This is something I personally did a lot as a spearman back in the day, and you can find a good number of videos of warriors absolutely demolishing Carnival PQ